It started as an ordinary flight, a peaceful journey among strangers, each lost in their own world. But for one passenger, the day took an unexpected turn. A polite and soft-spoken black man was seated quietly, minding his own business, when an accident changed everything. The stewardess, rushing to serve meals in the bustling cabin, stumbled, spilling food all over him. His crisp outfit was ruined, and the situation could have been handled with a simple apology. But instead, what came next left the cabin in an awkward hush. Her response? Less than kind, dismissive even, as if he was somehow at fault. Passengers watched, unsure of how to react. Some whispered, others turned away, avoiding the tension. Yet the man remained calm, composed, and dignified, despite the obvious frustration he must have felt. But here's a twist. When the plane landed, the unexpected happened. What unfolded next left everyone stunned and served as a powerful reminder about how the smallest actions can echo louder than anyone might imagine. Stay tuned to discover how karma worked its magic in a way no one on that flight saw coming. You won't want to miss how this story ends. As the passengers filed off the plane, many couldn't stop thinking about the awkward scene mid-flight. Some had stolen glances at the man after the incident, wondering how he managed to stay so calm. He'd simply cleaned himself up as best he could and returned to his seat, not uttering a single harsh word. That kind of composure was rare, especially when the stewardess had barely acknowledged her mistake. The stewardess, on the other hand, seemed unaffected. She went about her duties as if nothing had happened, even cracking jokes with other passengers. Her dismissive attitude left a bitter taste in the mouths of those who had witnessed it. A few people whispered about whether they should have stepped in, but the flight had moved on, and so had the crew. As the plane approached the gate, the air was thick with anticipation. Something about the stewardess's overconfidence felt misplaced, like she was unaware of what might be waiting on the other side of the door. And the man, he still hadn't said much, but there was an unshakable dignity in the way he carried himself. What none of them realized was that the real story was just beginning to unfold. As the passengers disembarked, the stewardess remained at the front of the plane, forcing a bright smile for everyone passing by. She barely glanced at the man as he exited, though a few passengers gave him sympathetic nods or murmured quiet words of support. His calm demeanor hadn't wavered, but there was a subtle determination in his eyes, as though he was carrying more than just the weight of the incident. Out in the terminal, people began to disperse, the buzz of travel resuming around them. The stewardess, now off duty, walked briskly toward the employee lounge, seemingly eager to put the flight behind her. She chuckled softly as she recounted the spilled food story to a colleague, downplaying her behavior and framing the man as overly sensitive. What she didn't notice was that several passengers, overhearing her, exchanged uneasy glances. Meanwhile, the man had quietly stepped aside near baggage claim, seemingly unnoticed. But he wasn't idle. A sharp observer might have noticed him typing on his phone with precision, capturing the details of what had transpired. Unbeknownst to the stewardess, her actions had sparked a ripple effect. Strangers began sharing what they'd seen, and a larger narrative started forming, one that was about to take on a life of its own. The airport was bustling, but for a few of the passengers from that flight, the events on board still lingered in their minds. Some had captured snippets of the incident on their phones, quietly sharing them with friends or posting vague comments online. The story began to grow in whispers, a quiet murmur rippling through the terminal. The stewardess, still oblivious to the attention her actions had drawn, left the lounge to join her colleagues. She laughed confidently, brushing off any mention of the mishap. Her attitude gave no hint that she suspected the man, or anyone else, might take further steps. To her, the situation was over, but for others, it wasn't. The man, meanwhile, remained composed as he waited near the airport's exit. His phone buzzed with activity, and his expression stayed calm but focused. A few passengers approached him, offering words of support and quietly sharing their disappointment about how the situation had been handled. Each interaction seemed to fuel a sense of unity among those who had witnessed the event. And then, as the stewardess walked through the terminal toward her next destination, something began to shift. Strangers glanced at her, murmuring. A buzz of tension filled the air. The story was no longer confined to a few witnesses, it was growing. The stewardess was about to face the unexpected, and no one could predict how it would all unfold. As the stewardess strode confidently through the terminal, she began to notice something unusual. People were staring, some discreetly, others more openly. Whispers floated in the air, and a few travelers glanced between their phones and her face, as if trying to confirm something. She brushed it off at first, assuming it was her uniform drawing attention, but the murmurs grew louder, and she started to feel a creeping sense of unease. Meanwhile, the man had quietly stepped outside to wait for his ride. His phone buzzed again, and this time he smiled faintly. It wasn't smug or triumphant, just a quiet acknowledgement of something unfolding. He'd said nothing publicly, but it seemed others had taken up the cause. Passengers had begun posting their accounts online, some even tagging the airline, and then the second twist emerged. One of the videos taken mid-flight had started gaining traction. The stewardess's dismissive tone, the man's dignified response, and the silent support of other passengers painted a vivid picture. It wasn't just a small incident anymore. It was becoming a public conversation about respect, professionalism, and accountability. The video spread like wildfire, drawing reactions from far beyond the airport walls. Back in the terminal, the stewardess's phone buzzed. She glanced down, her expression shifting from confidence to confusion. Notifications piled up, comments, messages, and even emails. Her actions, once unnoticed, were now under the spotlight, and she wasn't prepared for what was coming next. The stewardess's heart sank as she scrolled through her phone. The comments were relentless, calling out her behavior and sharing support for the man she had brushed off. It wasn't just passengers from the flight. Strangers from across the internet were weighing in. She glanced around nervously, suddenly hyper-aware of every look, every whisper. The weight of the growing attention was undeniable. Meanwhile, the man had quietly departed, still saying little but clearly aware of the storm brewing behind him. His silence had become part of what drew people in. His calm in the face of mistreatment spoke louder than any words could have. The airline, alerted to the situation through the viral posts, issued a quick response. They promised to investigate and even reached out to the man privately to offer an apology. But just when it seemed the story was wrapping up, the final twist arrived. As the stewardess attempted to retreat to a quieter area, she was stopped by an airline manager waiting for her. It turned out the man she dismissed wasn't just any passenger. He was a well-known figure in the aviation industry, traveling incognito. His reputation for fairness and professionalism only amplified the public's reaction. The stewardess realized too late that her actions had rippled far beyond what she imagined. For the man, it wasn't about revenge. It was a reminder that how we treat others always matters, no matter who's watching. In the days that followed, the story continued to spread, sparking conversations about kindness and accountability in customer service. The airline issued a public apology, not just to the man, but to all passengers who had witnessed the incident. They promised better training for their staff and highlighted the importance of treating everyone with respect, regardless of the situation. The stewardess, facing both public and internal scrutiny, took a step back from her duties. It was clear she hadn't expected her actions to gain such attention. For her, it became a humbling lesson, a moment that reminded her of the power of her role and the impact her words and actions could have. As for the man, he remained as gracious as ever. He later shared a thoughtful statement, encouraging people to approach situations with patience and understanding. His calm response throughout the ordeal had inspired many, proving that dignity and kindness could speak volumes in the face of adversity. The story ended not with anger or revenge, but with growth and reflection. It left behind an important message. The smallest actions can ripple far and wide, and how we treat others, even in fleeting moments, truly matters.